Welcome to this edition of Real World Employment Law, where we discuss real-world issues impacting companies and executives. I'm Declan Leonard. I'm managing partner here at Berenzweig Leonard, and I also head up the firm's employment law practice.
And I'm Elizabeth Payne-Maddalena. I'm a senior associate attorney here at Berenzweig Leonard, also in the employment practice.
Liz, great to have you here once again in the BLC Digital Strategies studios here in our office here in Tyson's Corner. We've got our producer extraordinaire, Todd Castleberry, also the president of BLC Digital Strategies in the other room, probably laughing at us right now, as he always does. But anyways, thanks for coming back in. I will pull the curtain back and say we had this big debate before of who has the best of the fast food subs. Jersey Mike's, because that's what we had for lunch, because that's what Clyde picked because he won the football pool, or Subway, or what was the other one? Jimmy John's.
Jimmy John's, yeah.
Yes.
And I think the vote was Jersey Mike's.
I think Jersey Mike's, and you were going to get into some stories about Subway, which I think we, for legal reasons, should ixnay on that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. that is for another time and place.
And I told you my view of Jimmy John's, but we'll keep that off camera. Anyways, we are here talking about, there seems to be a theme, in my opinion, for some of these podcasts that we've been doing lately in employment law. And the theme is what is happening at the state level when it comes to employment law? Because at the federal level, I mean, let's face it, we all know Congress can barely get anything done these days. And of course, you know, when you have election years and stuff like that, there's even more of a stop still there in Congress. So it seems like the states are really taking up the, you know, sort of the mantle of employment law. So today what we're going to be talking about is what are the states doing to try to lessen the gap when it comes to pay disparity in the workplace, most commonly based on gender and race.
Yes. And that's exactly what's happening. And you are exactly right that the states are really taking up the mantle right now. And we're seeing this when it comes to the pay disparity issues in two ways, really, that states are pushing this forward. The first is more and more states are putting laws into place to limit or prohibit employers from getting salary history from job applicants during the hiring process, and limiting how they use that information if they do obtain it somehow. So that way salary history is not being considered when making offers. So
just to stop you there, so you know, when you see these applications, you know, 10 years ago or whatever, it would have a little slot, you know, what was your last salary, and so the thought behind that is if there is pay disparity, if there is discrimination in pay, then every time you do that and it takes into account with the new employer, you're sort of perpetuating these the discrimination or the disparity in pay, right?
Yeah, exactly. If we know that it is still an issue today with pay disparity. The gender pay gap has been heavily publicized. There's also the racial pay gap, and it really affects across all sorts of different spectrums. And so we know this is still an issue. So it's exactly as you said. If someone has been historically underpaid, then getting their salary history is actually not something that's going to help increase that equity with a new employer.
Can you ask salary demand?
I believe that you still can ask for a salary demand.
I think so, because that would be that's what the person wants. Not you're not saying based on what you've made before. So I think you probably could still do that.
Yeah, as long as you're not asking for prior documentation, you're not, or what they're trying to use it to get around the rule, you know, where you say, well, what are you basing that demand off of? And what you're really trying to get at is salary history. As long as you're not doing that, you're still allowed to ask applicants, what are you looking for? Because that is reasonable. So
that's the first group, which is prohibitions against asking somebody's salary history. Would you say, like, how many states have taken up that mantle? Or just kind of generally estimating?
I think about 10 states so far, and then there are some localities too, some local jurisdictions. Maryland, I believe, is one that is prohibiting salary disclosure during salary history disclosure during certain parts of the hiring process. Colorado, California, or other states.
A lot of the states that we see on the forefront of a lot of what I would call sort of active employment policies, you know, California, you mentioned, New York, Colorado, and the problem is you could say, well, I'm not a Colorado company, but we know with COVID and even perhaps before COVID, with the proliferation of remote workers, like how does that impact this?
Well, that actually comes into a large amount of play because it's exactly as you said. Once you start having remote workers, or you start, branching out, maybe you are working on a contract where you're going to need to hire some people in Colorado, in California, something like that, these laws do come into play. And that's especially important when you get into the other category, which are these pay transparency laws.
Okay, so that's the second type. The first one, not asking about salary history. Stop doing that, basically, across the board. And now the other one is pay transparency. Tell us what that is.
Yeah, so this is a more aggressive approach to increasing equity and closing the wage gaps by requiring employers in certain states to disclose either sometime during the hiring process or even on the job postings themselves. Here's the salary range for this position. Here's the benefits that go with it. So
it's not just pay, but it's benefits too. So if somebody posts on, Indeed or something like that, one of the online job posting sites, they have to, how specific do they have to get? Can they just give a really wide range, or like what have you seen out there?
There has to be some reason to it. You can't put a salary range of, $0 to $1 million. That's
Infinity.
just not going to fly. Yeah. It does have to be grounded in some sort of reasonable basis. But it should be, I would tell an employer if they're asking me what does the range have to be, I would also remind them, you're trying to attract the best and most qualified candidates out there. So if you put a low range trying to lowball it, you're not going to get those good candidates. You're probably not going to get the cream of the crop doing so. So you're also, might want to keep that in mind too.
So in other words, you're saying don't look at this as just a real drag on the business. Maybe look at it a little bit more as a competitive process. I know that when Colorado first passed its pay transparency law, saying you had to give the range of pay in these postings, I think a lot of people had a visceral reaction, and some companies were even saying publicly, we're just not advertising for jobs, and we don't want to hire anyone in Colorado. And so kind of had an unintended consequence. The legislator passes this thinking it's protecting its employees, and then they get sort of blacklisted off of being able to be hired. But you're saying maybe take a different view.
Yeah, and definitely, because I think it actually does help with hiring. If you are a company where you have a salary range, you put it out there, you're actually kind of bypassing in some ways that part of the hiring process where every company faces this. They have a great candidate, they'd love to get them in the door, they've gone through the interview process, they make an offer, and it turns out that applicant's salary expectations are here and the company cannot meet that. And so you get to bypass that by disclosing this information. It also helps you figure out how competitive you are in the field. I do want to note, because you mentioned that some employers had said when Colorado issued their law saying, "Oh, I'm not going to hire Colorado employees." That is not the approach to take. I would say that is a loser approach to take.
I think Colorado caught on to that, right?
Yes, yeah. Colorado has issued guidance saying, don't do that. We will consider that a violation. And Colorado, because it is required to be in the job posting, each deficient job posting is a separate violation under their law.
Yeah.
I think that's how California's is too. So you do not want to put on a bunch of job postings for remote work or work that has some Colorado connection to it. We're not hiring Colorado employees unless you want to become intimately acquainted with their civil penalties process.
So I think there's always this historical inclination by businesses to try to keep pay issues, kind of quiet, secretive, whatever. And there's some rationale for that. A lot of companies really value sort of their meritocracy, and they like to have discretion to be able to reward high achievers without without it necessarily always being, disclosed in the public realm. But I think that inclination is also ignores a critical point, which is you really can't keep your employees quiet when it comes to pay. Isn't that right?
Yeah, there's federal law in place. It has been for a while. Employers are never allowed to tell employees you cannot disclose the terms of your salary and benefits you can't share that with other employees. That is not allowed. That is a surefire way to end up in trouble with the Department of Labor on the federal level. So something you don't want to do.
And us employment nerds, we throw around the phrase Section 7 rights. Every employee in the United States has Section 7 rights. It's actually administered by the National Labor Relations Board, which is like, something that most people think of when they think of unions. But there are some rights afforded by the National Labor Relations Board, closely aligned to the Department of Labor, that basically say you cannot keep employees from talking about what they call the terms and conditions of employment, but that would be pay, that would be benefits. And so even without these laws that are designed to sort of bring pay more out into the public square, you really can't stop employees from talking anyway. So they could, and nowadays with social media and everything and sites where employees are all joined together, they can be posting this stuff left and right.
Right. And thank you, first of all, for catching that. It's the states have their departments of labor, but yes, when it comes to the Fair Labor Standards Act, that is the National Labor Relations Board.
Yeah.
So you were correct. And
every once in a while, Liz,
yeah.
I get something right, When I watch Jeopardy at home, I'm always those top categories, the 200 one, but as soon as it gets down to the lower ones, I'm the worst.
Yeah. Once I see the $600 questions, I'm out. So yeah. But I think you are right. This is something where employees are becoming increasingly aware of their rights. I think especially employees under 45 are very cognizant of what they're allowed to share, what they're allowed to do. And so, your employees are going to talk and they are going to figure this stuff out anyways. So it is going to come out there. You can't stop them from sharing this information. And again, in some ways it can help with especially companies who are trying to advance DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and initiatives by making this information more transparent for, general salary ranges and benefits available for positions. So I think it is out there. There's nothing you can do to stop employees from sharing it, but it is not all bad and employers can use this in a lot of ways.
As I said at the beginning, this theme of like sort of a state-by-state patchwork, I think we've done a prior podcast on some of the leave laws. We've done prior podcasts on other state-by-state issues. We did one not too long ago. I did one with Alexi on data privacy. I think we do have to acknowledge, though, that this state-by-state patchwork of laws, whether it's on this issue of pay, whether it's on the issue of sick leave laws, it does present a lot of challenges for HR, especially when you're talking about remote workforces.
Yes, it really does. And I think it shows why we do need more top-down guidance in this. So that way employers, especially in this increasingly, interconnected world for employers, so they don't have to go, okay, well, I just hired someone in California, so that means I have to comply with this and this, but I also have to comply with this and this in Connecticut. It is so much. So that's why I do think we need more overhead guidance on the federal level just to create some consistency across the board.
Yeah.
However,
is it going to happen?
We'll
see about that. We'll see about that. Well, listen, I think what we can probably expect to see in 2023 is more states coming into the mix. New York recently entered the fray, and in typical New York fashion, they went big. They actually include independent contractors when it comes to pay transparency, so they don't limit it just to employees. And I suspect each state, more states will join the fray and try to come in with these pay transparency laws. Again, the goal of them, pay equity, that is absolutely a laudable goal. There's no doubt about it. But we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the HR challenges that they pose.
Definitely. And that is why it is always a great idea to make sure that you're checking in with employment lawyers, keeping an eye
Nice
on
plug.
our
I like that.
podcasts. Yes.
Yes.
So that way you can stay up to date with what's going on and what's changing. And, you have a place that you know and trust that you can go.
Liz, great discussion. Look forward to the next time we get in the studio here.
Great. Thank you. You too.
Thank you all.